Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another amazing day at Google. Today is particularly amazing since we have Jake here for a Musicians at Google performance. Um, it's our pleasure to introduce Jake Shimabukuro to be here at Google to share his love for life, his love for the ukulele, and his love for traditional Hawaiian culture. With a very googly mantra of peace, love, and ukulele, Jake has taken ukulele to new heights throughout the world. From his beloved rendition of While My Guitar Gently Weeps, which really was my first introduction to his work, to his self-composed, virtuosic Toast Man and everything else that's on his recorded works. He's an ambassador of Hawaiian culture. He's actually shared his love for the ukulele with everyone from the Queen of England to legions of parrot heads, such as myself, as a member of the Coral Reefer Band. And that's not to mention his big role at YouTube, where he's popularized the ukulele and also just really touched the lives of millions of people that have seen his YouTube videos. He has an enthusiasm for life and music that is really unparalleled, and that's why we're particularly honored to have him here at Google today. So he'll be speaking to us today about his life, his work, and his music. And as he says, music is good medicine. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jake Shimabukuro.
Thank you, Cliff. Well, thank you so much. As I said earlier, I'm just ecstatic to be here today, and this is really great. Just to give you a little bit of background, myself, I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii, and I started playing the ukulele when I was 4 years old. And my mom played, and so she was my first teacher. And from the moment that she first put it in my hands, I immediately fell in love with this instrument. Just something about the sound of it. Because of the high range of the instrument, it always kind of it's very similar to like a child's voice, and I think that this instrument kind of makes people feel like a kid again. It's just one of those things, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I'm always, one of the things that I truly believe is that, the ukulele is really the instrument of peace. Because if everyone played the ukulele, I think this world would be a happier place. So I hope to share some of my happiness with you today. So I'm going to start off with a little song here. This is a tune called 143. It's a new tune that I just composed, and I thought it would be appropriate to kind of open this up because I remember when I was in school, we didn't have cell phones or the internet or anything like that. It was just, if you were cool, you had a pager, and so there was no text messaging, back then. So I remember we would have these numeric codes, and 143 was the numeric code for I love you. So if you had your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever, you would text that. You would send them the page 143. So this is a song about that, and it goes something like this. Thank you very much. So when I first started playing the ukulele, growing up in Hawaii, it was a lot of traditional Hawaiian music, So I started out playing things like, this is what we all start out playing. But with three chords, with those simple three chords, you can play over 300 traditional Hawaiian tunes. So it kept me busy for a long time. But of course, then when I was a teenager, I started listening to different styles of music, and then those three chords became things like. And back then, I thought, oh, this is so cool. I was like, wow, I can listen to, all different kinds of, instruments and try to mimic like guitar players and, pianists and horn players and all those things. And I could find these melodies, and try to play them on the ukulele. So I started, experimenting with different styles. And this next song was kind of what happened when I stumbled onto Carlos Montoya record, who was a master flamenco guitar player. So here's a flamenco ukulele piece for you. And this is an original composition entitled Let's Dance. And it goes something like this. Thank you. Song and Tell, let's dance. So this next tune that I'd like to perform is a song about growing up in Hawaii and being a kid. And one of my favorite drinks as a child was a good old Shirley Temple, and I drink like I don't know, like 5 or 6 of these. So I'd always have that because there's a lot of sugar in a Shirley Temple, So I was one of those, and I drive my parents crazy sometimes. But this is a song about being a kid and drinking one too many Shirley Temples, and it's a song I like to call "Me and Shirley Tea," and it goes something like this. Thank you. You know, I truly believe that music is one of the things that can really, you know, can really help to, can help people in so many ways. Music is all about communicating, just pure emotion. And that's one of the reasons I really enjoy performing is because, you connect with people on a level that, I think words can never, will never be able to do. And so this is actually a song that I wrote a few years ago, and it was for a friend of mine whose grandmother was very ill, and she was in the hospital. And while she was in the hospital, she was under a lot of medication, and she would have these hallucinations of blue roses on the ceiling above her bed. And at night, she'd see the petals fall on top of her. And when she shared this with me, I thought it was such a beautiful vision, and it inspired me to write this next piece. This is a song I call Blue Roses Falling. Thank you very much. This next song that I'd like to perform is actually was my attempt at attacking a song that was completely composed to for a certain instrument, you know. And this is a Japanese folk tune that is usually well is normally played on the koto, which is a 13-stringed instrument, you know, that sits on the floor and you play it with these finger picks, and it has the most incredible sound, you know. And I remember hearing this instrument while I was in Japan, and just I was just completely blown away. You know, it just took me to another place, you know. And so when I went back home to Hawaii, I wanted to, you know, I remember I just that haunting sound was just stuck in my head, and I wanted to figure out a way to express that through my instrument. And so this is a song entitled Sakura Sakura, and it's about the annual cherry blossom season in Japan. And this is my attempt at, well, this was my attempt at, I guess, transforming my little 4-string Hawaiian ukulele into a 13-string Japanese koto. Thank you. Sakura Sakura. This next tune is a song. A few years ago, my dad told me, he said, "Hey, you write all these songs, but how come you never wrote a song for me?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I wrote this song for my dad about almost 2 years ago. But it's a song that, because I remember when I was a kid and my dad he had this green pickup truck, and for some reason he was always low on gasoline. So as soon as we got into his truck, the very first stop was always the nearest gas station. And I remember when we'd pull in, the attendant would come to the car and my dad would say, $5 unleaded. And I just thought, oh, that's so cool. So this song is about, it's about those times when we'd go to the gas station. And I wrote I wrote the song in three parts. The first part reflects all the emotions that you feel when you're driving around on a full tank of gasoline. So it's very bouncy, upbeat, and happy. The second part is everything you feel when that fuel light starts to flash. So the music changes a bit, you get a little stressed out and worried, looking for that nearest gas station. And then the third part is when you actually find the gas station and you pull in and then you stop, right? You stop, and then you fill up your gas tank and goo 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 goo, and then it gets happy again, right? And you're off and driving away. So this is a tune I call $5 Unleaded, and it goes something like this. Thank you very much. You know, it's been really amazing over the last few years now. I've been having incredible opportunities to, play for to play all over the world. And, in the last few years now, I've been able to travel to places like, Japan and Australia, Canada, Singapore, Saipan, Guam. And last year, I actually started, it was my first time touring Europe, and we did like Sweden, Finland, France, and in about a couple weeks, I'm going to do another Europe tour, and I'll be going to places like Russia and the Netherlands, Poland, and I never ever would have thought that this little four-string instrument, when I was at home practicing, I don't think my parents ever thought that, keep practicing, boy, you're going to go to Russia one of these days and play and, travel the world. And, but this next tune is a song that was inspired by one of my heroes, um, and that's another thing, playing the ukulele. I've been able to collaborate with a lot of musicians that I grew up listening to, people that have inspired me, people like like Cliff was saying, Jimmy Buffett and the Coral Reefer Band. I've been able to record with people like Yo-Yo Ma, Ziggy Marley, this Bette Midler. It's been really insane. And this next song was inspired by another one of my heroes, the great Bela Fleck, whom I did a tour with about 3 years ago with Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, and we did a bunch of these bluegrass festivals, and it was just incredible. I was so inspired by the music, and it kind of motivated me to write this next song. This is a kind of a bluegrass ukulele piece that was partly inspired by the Orange Blossom Special. This is a song I call Orange World. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, at this time, I really want to thank all of you very, very much because, I would not be here today if it weren't for Google and YouTube, and you have it's really been amazing, for artists like myself or anyone that has something to share, with the rest of the world now because they have access to you. I mean, just if they're, right now, I'm just a click away from anyone, if they want to learn more about what I do, and it's so great. And, and one of the things that I really, really, that's really important to me is, through music and through everything that I do with the ukulele, I talked about, the instrument of peace and all of that. And I really believe in that. I really believe that music brings so much joy to people. And I really take it upon myself, because, like other artists, because of what you do, allowing people like myself to share what we do with the rest, with people all over the world. I feel a great responsibility that we share good things. We use Google and we use YouTube as a way to promote positive energy and a way to promote positive thinking. And for me, growing up with the ukulele, this is just, it's like the perfect tool. Anyone can learn this instrument. It's the easiest thing to do. I mean, seriously, I know that I was told that there are a lot of people here at Google that actually play the ukulele. So I was pretty excited, to hear about that, because it truly is. There's a really great resurgence in this instrument, and if you look on, if I'm sure all of you are aware, you go on Google or YouTube, and you'll just find all these young kids like just shredding on ukulele and doing all these great things. People are trading in their guitars for ukuleles now. And I just think that's fantastic, and it's the perfect combination, because here you have, what you do, which is, I mean, so on in the digital age, and this time of advanced technology, you guys are so much on this end of the spectrum, just leading the way. And the ukulele is kind of like on the complete opposite of the spectrum, It's kind of like it's the most simple of all instruments, and it's the most humble, and just, and it's so, I don't know, it's just, there's something really magical about it, It's the only instrument that you can just mention the name to someone and they'll smile, Like sometimes I travel and I'll be sitting at the airport with my case and someone will come up to me, hey, what's in the case? They're expecting me to say violin or something, but I'll be like, oh no, it's an ukulele. And they're like, oh, it's a ukulele? They're like, wow, you play the ukulele, But, what other instrument would provoke that, right? And so it's there's something really special and magical about it, and that's why I'm so happy to be here. If it weren't for what you do and what you provide, for the world, I wouldn't be here today, and I wouldn't be able to travel and do all these, continue doing my passion. So I really, really appreciate your your gift to me. Thank you very, very much.
As is our tradition here at the Musicians at Google Project, we do leave some time for questions and answers. Does anyone have any questions for Jake right now?
Hi, Jake. Thank you. That was outstanding. How do you structure your practice time when I imagine you're kind of mature in your craft now, but how is that? How's your practice time different than it was growing up? And then how do you structure like songwriting versus skill maintenance, etc., while you practice?
Yeah. Well, when I was growing up, I never. There was really no such thing as oh, you better practice your ukulele. Oh, you better practice ukulele. Growing up, people are always, you always hear like, oh, I gotta practice piano. I gotta practice violin. Those were considered serious instruments where you need to spend time practicing. But the ukulele was definitely not one of those instruments. I mean, it was, you know, it's like if you play the ukulele, it was just more of a fun thing. It was like playing video games or something, you know. I mean, that's what that's how I looked at it, and a lot of times my parents would have to take the instrument away from me, so that I would eat dinner or I would, you know, go do my homework or clean my room because I would never wanted to, I could never put it down really. So I never thought of it as practice. To me, growing up, it was never, oh, I better put in my 3 hours of ukulele practice or 4 hours or whatever it was. It was just every time I would come home from school, I would pick it up and I'd play, you know, do some homework, then after I pick it up and play, after I shower, pick it up and play, you know, and that's I just absolutely loved it, you know. So it was, now looking back, I realized that's I was so passionate about that instrument, and I never wanted to play anything else. You know, most people, they'll start off with the ukulele, but after that they want to move on to the guitar or, you know, another instrument where they can play different styles of music. And but the ukulele, for some reason, I just fell in love with it, and I fell in love with the limitations of the instrument because I never saw the limitations as something that would hold me back. You know, I always believed that, you know, you know, the instrument is what it is. You know, it's beautiful just the way it is, and I think it's you know, is the people who pick it up. You know, we're the ones who put limitations on the instrument. You know, the instruments aren't limited by themselves, and a lot of times, you know, we just have to look to ourselves to kind of use our imaginations and expand on other ways. And the way that I see the ukulele is because, you know, it has such a small range and it's only 4 strings. I find a lot of power in that, you know, because then it challenges me to to really um, to really expand on the other aspects of music. You know, if you play the piano, there's so many notes that you can pretty much cover whatever you want to cover. You know, but it's like, the way I like to think of it is, you know, you have all your senses, but like for example, like someone who is blind, someone who is visually impaired, you know, their sense of hearing and their sense of touch and smell becomes so incredible because they're not relying on their vision anymore. You know, so it's like with the ukulele, I can't rely on its range because it doesn't have the kind of range that a piano or any other instrument would have. You know, so in that sense, now I have to take advantage of the other aspects of music, you know, tone color, timbre, you know, dynamics, you know, all these rhythmic things and chord voicings and, you know, expanding on harmonies and things like that, you know. So for me, a lot of the practice that I would put into wasn't just so much sitting with the instrument and playing, but was just kind of experiencing life, you know, just kind of going out and seeing things and trying different things, you know. All of that, that's whenever I pick up the ukulele, that's what I'm playing, you know, that's what I'm doing. And when I'm composing songs, um, a lot of times I'll just focus on a specific moment in my life and how I felt, and then I try to you know, express that, you know, through the ukulele. So for me, practice time is 24 hours a day. You know, it's when I'm sleeping, it's when I'm having lunch, it's, you know, visits like these, you know, surrounding myself with, you know, in a room full of geniuses, and, you know, and just being inspired, you know. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And I think for me, you know, as far as like practicing all the technical stuff, what I do, instead of just sitting in my room and just practicing one technique over and over, what I do is, because that's meaningless. If you just sit there and you practice right hand tapping, just, you know, over and over, then it's like, so what? Okay, you can do that. But what I would do is I would take one technique and I would just write a song around that one technique. So that way, I'm not just practicing the technique, but by practicing a song and playing the song, you know, essentially I'm mastering that one technique. So if I'm playing like a flamenco piece and I'm doing these things, you know, these flamenco strums and all that, I won't do that in any other song. I'll keep it specific for that song. So that becomes my song. You know, if I'm doing a tapping tune, that becomes that song. Or if I'm doing like a crazy banjo, like, you know, bluegrassy thing, that just becomes for that song. All the techniques that I use is just for that song. So, and I think that really helped me to kind of focus on, that really helped me to keep each song a little bit unique, you know, because with instrumental music, it's so difficult, you know, they all pretty much sound the same, you know, after a while. And especially with the ukulele, you know, my goal was always to make every song sound different, because I didn't have a vocalist and I'm a horrible singer, so that's why I would have to do a lot of instrumental music. But yes, thank you.
Hello. First of all, I think you're God's gift to music, at least for me. Uh, and I just had a couple of questions about, did you ever get formal training in music? Just that your form and your melody sound so intricate. Did you ever go to formal music school? And do you ever experiment with your instrument as in effects and all those fancy things? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you very much, first of all. Thank you. I started out just playing by ear and just having fun with the ukulele, and then later on when I was a teenager, someone turned me on to music theory, and I was like, music theory, what is that, And and then that's when I just started, I started buying these books and just reading about notes and reading about, like, when you see like a C7 chord, what is the 7? What does a 7 mean? Why do we have these numbers in chords? And so then I got turned on to music theory, and then I became really obsessed with it. I started, it was you see, normally when people, I think when most students of music begin their journey, they start off reading music, right? They start off reading music. They learn all the proper way to hold their instruments. They learn traditionally, there is a sequence of things that you learn to get to where you want to, what you want to do. But the interesting thing, I think, for me is starting with the ukulele. I really started backwards. I really started, when I first started playing, it was just, people would tell me, okay, put your finger here and strum that. Okay, now the next chord, put your finger here and just do this. And I'd be like, okay. And it was fun. I didn't know anything about notes. I didn't know anything about rhythms or anything like that. It was just, okay, this sound and getting familiar with what, how it's like speaking, when you talk. You're not so worried about the words that you're using when you're learning to speak. You just, whatever comes out, like when babies talk, it's just they make all kinds of weird sounds, but that's how they learn. And that's kind of how I learned to play music. I had absolutely no idea what I was playing, and I couldn't make any sense of it, but I knew that I liked the sound. It was like, okay. And then I'd hear other people play, and I'd be like, oh, okay, let me try and sound like that, And that's how we learn when we speak. We're just surrounded by people who speak the language that we want to learn. And then we're hearing it all the time, and we try to mimic. And that's how I started playing the ukulele. And then later on, once I got familiar with hearing other musicians play something, and then I was like, I know that sound, and I could just play it, even though I don't know what I'm doing or what they're doing. I could mimic them, And that's kind of like how we learn how to talk, right? Then after that, once I developed my ear, then it kind of went. Then I started getting into like, okay, well, there's a way that you can notate this, and you can actually write music, And I was like, what is that? And then I started learning about notes. Then I started learning about theory. In college, I took some music theory courses. I took classes in composition, and all these things that I've been doing, when I was a kid, made sense. I was like, I see. Oh, that's what I'm doing. Okay, And so it was just it was a different kind of feeling, I think, for me. I had a different experience, because I was kind of already doing some of this stuff, and then for a professor to sit there and tell me, okay, this is what you're doing, and I would be like, oh, okay, now I understand. And because I was already doing it, it's kind of weird, because even like, improvising, my whole life basically I was improvising, but then from going from there to now learning how to read music and to sit in front of a sheet and then learn how to play, what I'm told to play, became a totally, different experience. And then learning it that way, I think it really helped me to become more of a natural, instinctive player. So if I'm in a situation and I'm playing with a string quartet, or if I'm playing, with a jazz trio or a rock band or a blues band, whatever it is, I could just sit there and listen and figure out, what to do. And with the ukulele, it's a little tricky, because there aren't, it's not like you can if you play the trumpet, you can go and listen to a Miles Davis record and learn how to play jazz, but with the ukulele, it's like if you want to learn how to play flamenco ukulele, you're not really going to be able to find a flamenco player and listen to them and do. You just have to create your own path, And I think for me that was key, is by learning the way that I did, starting out the way that I did. I had no rules. There were no boundaries. Nothing told me that you have to do it this way and you have to do it that way, But I was just free to do whatever I want and experiment, with anything. And going to the effects and all that, I actually went through a whole period of playing through Marshall stacks and wah-wah pedals and all of that, And it's funny because you go through that whole phase. I mean, I went through a phase where I had a pedal board that had like 13 different effect pedals on there. Everything from like sequas to delays and all these crazy echoes and phasers and flangers and all of that. And then about 4 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago, I just kind of I put that aside and I went back to just the pure basic acoustic sound of the instrument, because I realized that that's where the instrument's strength lies, in its simplicity, And so ever since then, yeah, I've just gone back to just the pure, sound of the instrument.
So you have videos on YouTube that have over 1 million views. Were you initially aware of that, and how has that contributed to your success?
Well, the video of While My Guitar Gently Weeps in Central Park, that video, I think got put up on YouTube 5 years ago. So it was when YouTube just kind of started. So at the time, I mean, I'll be honest, at the time I didn't know what YouTube was. But there was, but this was 5 years ago, right? So, now everybody knows what it is. But I was getting emails from friends, because I had a lot of friends that were up here on the mainland, in college and stuff, and they'd email me and be like, "Hey, man, there's this crazy video of you like going around our campus, Do you know about this?" I was like, "No, I was just sitting at home and really doing just surfing and stuff, So, but the whole time while I was in Hawaii, there was this little viral video that was going around, and then I was getting contacted by people all over the world, people saying, "Oh my gosh, I just saw this video of you playing, in Central Park, and I love the ukulele. Do you have any music or CDs? I want to get your stuff, or can you come and play in our city and all this kind of thing." And it was, I mean, I was just growing up in Hawaii. I started out playing in coffee shops, and the coffee shops I started playing in, I mean, you couldn't hold more than 4 or 5 people. I mean, that was a full house. So, I mean, so it really. It really, I mean, I was just blown away. I didn't know what to think of it. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I mean, I still can't. I still can't, because, I mean, till this day, I still get people that come to the shows, and they say that, "Oh, I discovered you through YouTube. I discovered you through YouTube." I mean, 9 out of 10 people will tell me that, and it's really been amazing, and I feel so blessed, because of that, and I guess it's really changed. It's changed the way that people hear music and discover artists now. I mean, even for me, I spent hours and hours on YouTube, looking up if, like, for example, if I wanna, get a guitar lesson from Jimmy Bruno, I just type in his name and bam, I can learn all of his licks and learn all of his, I mean, his guitar methods. It's insane. Anytime that I need a little jolt of inspiration, I'll go pull up some YouTube video of one of my favorite artists, and that's something that you could never do before. When I was growing up learning music, and everything was like cassette tapes, and then CDs just came out, and I was like, "Oh, okay, this is great." I would have to actually sit with a cassette tape. If I wanted to learn a song, I'd have to sit there, rewind it over and over, and listen, and stop it, rewind, listen again, stop, rewind. I'd have to do that over and over, and I couldn't even. And still, that's just using my ears. I could not visually see what was happening. But now, these young kids now, they learn so fast. There's all these virtuosos now, because they have unlimited access to any artist that they want, of any instrument. So they can if they're interested in ukulele, they can just type in ukulele, they can Google it or YouTube it, and it'll come up all these videos, and they can just sit there in front of their computer and actually watch someone playing it for them, like right in front of their eyes, and they can pause it and learn it, get the right fingering, go back, pause it again. And I mean, it's tremendous. I wish I had that when I was a kid, because but I mean, I don't know how that would have changed what I do today. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, I really don't know how that's going to affect these younger musicians, because now, sometimes I do workshops. And the thing that I find with a lot of these students that come to these workshops is they want to just, they don't have the patience to learn the fundamentals of music anymore. It's like they want that immediate, I want to learn this song. How do you do this? Before they even know exactly, the proper fingering or the proper right hand technique of strumming, they don't want to do that. As long as they just want to learn the song. They just want to, oh no, I want to learn how you play that on, and that ending on YouTube. How are you doing that? All that fast stuff. I mean, so it's changing the way that people think. People want that instant gratification now. In music, I find that. So I mean, in some ways, I think in some ways it's good, but in some ways, it can be bad too. So I think that, I think even with all the technology and all that, we still have to remember that, okay, we have to instill in these kids that, sometimes things do take work. Sometimes you have to work hard to achieve something. Not everything can be as simple as just being a click away. I mean, like my little nephews and stuff, they don't even know what a library is. They're like, what's a library? It's like, what? They have no idea what it is to go and do research at the public library. So I mean, so it's different. I think with certain things we have to remind the younger generation that, yeah, we have to slow down a little bit, and we have to appreciate certain things, because there are some things in life that's not worth just speeding through. And I think music is one of them. Playing the ukulele music is a great way to kind of step away from that world for a bit, and then kind of connect yourself again with everything that's happening in the moment. Yeah.
So we have time for one more brief question.
Hi. So you're really well known internationally for playing like rock and pop and country, but you got your start, and I remember hearing you from like playing contemporary Hawaiian music and like Pure Heart and all of that. How often do you go back and revisit that style and compose in that?
Oh, well, all the time, whenever I'm back home in Hawaii, I mean, all of my buddies all play traditional Hawaiian music. And so whenever I'm home, I mean, traditional Hawaiian music will always be my first love. That's because that's what I grew up playing. And which is very strange, because, if you're a jazz musician, and you start playing jazz, you start learning all these complex harmonies, and you learn all these standards. There's a set of standards that you learn, all these complicated chord changes, and you start learning how to improvise over these chord changes. It's a whole language. Same thing with classical music, same thing with flamenco music or bluegrass or any style of music that you can think of, blues, whatever it is, R&B. There's kind of there's structure, but Hawaiian music is kind of, it's one of the only forms of music in the world that is so simple. And the reason it's so simple is because traditional Hawaiian music, when in traditionally there was absolutely no harmonic structure. There was really no melody or anything like that. That came much later. Traditional Hawaiian music was all about rhythm, drum beats, like this little Hawaiian rhythmic things, and chanting. It was all chanting. And because in Hawaii there was no written language, everything was preserved in song. So songs were created to just, I mean, historically, so that they could so the stories, of each generation could be passed down. Yeah. So once instruments, like harmonic instruments like the ukulele or guitar, were introduced into Hawaiian music, it would started out very simple. You know, sometimes only two chords, or sometimes just one chord. You know, sometimes if you listen to chanting, like old traditional chanting, it'll only be two notes. You know, just it'll be you know, and they'll be chanting all this stuff. You know, and that's all it was. You know, so the music is very, very simple. It's so simple, and I think for, you know, for me starting out with that, you know, I have a great appreciation. Like I can sit with the ukulele and just strum a C chord for an hour and not get bored. You know, but you try to tell a jazz guy to do that, you know, he's gonna, I can't just hold a C chord for an hour and strum that, because harmonically they just get bored. They're like, you know, they can't even hold a C triad. You know, it's got to be a major 7 or a major 9, or they got to add the sharp 13 or something. You know, they got to change it up, because it doesn't stimulate anything for them. You know, it's not enough. But I think playing the ukulele, you learn to appreciate music in its most simplest form, and then in its most complex form. You know, so there's that, and that's a great, you know, to me, that there's a great power in that. You know, and I think with playing traditional Hawaiian music and going back to that, for me, always helps me to keep balanced. You know, whenever I go back home and I'm playing with my buddies and we're just sitting around the you know, the roasted pig, you know, the big pig on the stick or whatever, you know, we're just like, oh, and we're just having a little jam session, you know, and playing all these traditional Hawaiian tunes that I grew up with, really helps to bring me back, you know, to my roots, and kind of keeps me, you know, keeps my mind, you know, it keeps that window open like that. And so it's all about balance, I think, and that's what I always try to maintain in everything that I do.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Jake. That was an amazing show.
Oh,
Thanks again
thank you,
for
Jeff.
performing for us.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you very, very much. Really, really appreciate it. I know how incredibly busy you guys are. I mean, you guys are so busy. You guys have your laundry room here and everything, and you know, so I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Take care, and aloha. We'll see you soon. Thank you.